Welcome. We are going to be talking more about speech today, again, about what the book of Proverbs has to say about speech. This is part 2. So, first of all, wise speech, according to Proverbs, is healing. There's one who speaks rashly, like the thrust of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Both parts of this verse are really interesting. The first one is saying that when we speak rashly, when we speak without thinking or without being wise about it, we can say things, they may be true, they may be heartfelt, we may mean them, but they're like thrusts of a sword. They cut people, they hurt them, they wound them. But it says the tongue of the wise not only doesn't rashly hurt people, but brings healing. Now, sometimes we have to speak hard things to people, but there's a difference between doing it rashly, without thought, without care, without concern, without compassion, and doing it as the tongue of the wise, which brings healing. But it's also exciting to me that we can bring healing to people with our words. Then it says, anxiety in a man's heart weighs it down, but a good word makes it glad. This is, again, encouraging to me to know that if somebody's worried, sometimes by knowing the right thing to say, by saying the right thing in the right way, I can bring gladness to somebody who's weighed down. Now, this doesn't mean, of course, you can say anything you want to somebody who's worried and they will stop worrying. But there is a power to what we say. There is a power to how we use our speech. And there's a power especially to wise speech that knows how to really encourage people with a word. A healing tongue is a tree of life, but perversion in it is the crushing of the spirit. Once again, the tongue, the words we say have such power. They can be a whole tree of life to people. They can be so life-giving, or they can crush people's spirits if we are perverted or twisted in the way we speak. Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Healing to the bones has to do with your strength and your health in general, and sweet to the soul has to do with the goodness and the pleasantness of it. Pleasant words are a honeycomb. So again, our words have tremendous power to make people's lives better and to make them stronger and healthier spiritually and to make their souls better. Jason talks about how is your soul doing? Our words can be part of helping each other to have strong souls. Evil plans are an abomination of the Lord, but pleasant words are pure. So this is contrasting two very different things, evil and pleasant plans and words, and being an abomination of the Lord versus being pure. So the evil person makes evil plans. No matter what he says, the intent of his heart is evil. That's an abomination of the Lord. The good person makes good plans, presumably, because he's not the evil plans, but he also then speaks those plans in pleasant words, and those things are pure. There's no evil plans mixed in with them. Pleasant words have to be free of the evil plans, but also it's pure as opposed to being an abomination to the Lord. So this is partly saying what good speech can be, but it's also emphasizing that the plans beneath it, the intent behind it, makes a big difference as well. Evil plans are an abomination of the Lord, no matter how pleasant your words are, but truly pleasant words need to be pure. Oil and perfume make the heart glad. So a man's counsel is sweet to his friend. This could mean a reproof, but it doesn't have to be. Counsel can be any kind of advice you give, and it can be encouragement, it can be reproof, it can be whatever it needs to be. But if my friend is speaking to me and paying attention to my needs and trying to help me out with whatever my struggle is, that can be like oil and perfume. It can be a luxury to me. And again, the power of wise speech to bring healing. In the end of Proverbs 31, we have the picture of like the virtuous woman. And one of the things it says of her is that she opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. So she speaks as a mother and as a wife and as a member of the community with wisdom, and she teaches kindness and in a way that is kind. And that's part of how her speech works. Then a couple of verses that I'm going to sort of put together. I'll put all three of these together. Starts with one that has nothing to do about wise speech. I just want to point it out because it connects to the others. It says, he cuts off his own feet and drinks violence, who sends a message by the hand of a fool. To send a message by hand of a fool is to destroy what I'm trying to accomplish with the message. But then I brought that up so you can compare it to the next verse. Like the cold of snow in the time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him, for he refreshes the soul of his masters. Like the cold of snow in the time of harvest, you're in the middle, it's hot, it's maybe sticky, it's or maybe not, maybe it's just dry, and it's uncomfortable, and there's snow falling, and it just cools everything down, and it's so refreshing. And it says that's what a faithful messenger is like to those who send him. They know that he will speak the word properly and will be good for their goals and their intentions. A wicked messenger falls into adversity, but a faithful envoy brings healing. So we want to be faithful envoys of the gospel for God. We want to be refreshing God's soul in a sense, and those that we are supporting. And so again, it's a different kind of healing that happens with wise speech. Next, and this is the one that I think we have forgotten sometimes, wise speech is persuasive. This is one of the most important verses, I think, for our time in Proverbs. The tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable, but the mouth of fools spouts folly. So the first thing here is the contradiction between the wise and the fools and knowledge and folly. The tongue of the wise is speaking knowledge. It's speaking truth. It's not shading the truth. It's not making up false things just to sound good. It's not just tickling people's ears. It's speaking truth, speaking knowledge. The mouth of fools just spouts folly, says whatever it feels like saying. But I want you to notice it says the tongue of the wise doesn't just speak knowledge, but makes it acceptable. That doesn't mean it lies to be acceptable. It means it makes the truth acceptable, makes knowledge acceptable. Again, that doesn't mean that nobody ever rejects the truth, but we can wrap the truth in such a way that it is acceptable and easy to hear as much as possible. And so that if people are going to reject the truth, we want them to reject it not because of the way we brought it, but because it's just something they don't want to accept. But we in our wisdom can try to make the knowledge, and we can make it acceptable, and then whether people accept it or not is up to them. The wise in heart will be called understanding, and sweetness of speech increases persuasiveness. Notice how those two are linked. The wise in heart will be called understanding. He'll understand what the issue is, what the need is, what to say. But then by speaking it sweetly, people will hear it. People will be influenced by it. People will be drawn to it. We can speak the gospel, we can speak the truths of Christianity in a way that increases persuasiveness. And then I love this one. The heart of the wise instructs his mouth and adds persuasiveness to his lips. If we grow in wisdom, we will grow in our ability to speak persuasively. We'll grow in our ability to help to know how to say things in a way that will make knowledge acceptable, in a way that will draw people to the truth. And then when it comes to the rulers, this is especially true. He who loves purity of heart and has grace on his lips, the king is his friend. If you really want to influence the rulers, it's saying, first of all, love purity of heart. In your heart, have the right motives, have the right thoughts, have the right attitudes. But secondly, have grace on your lips. Know how to speak in a way that is persuasive, in a way that is sweet. By forbearance, a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft tongue breaks the bone. You can try to break a bone with violence, and that's hard. But this is saying something kind of paradoxical. A soft tongue breaks the bone. What it means is that a ruler who's extremely stubborn and refuses to budge on all sorts of things, if you approach him with patience and softness, sometimes that will break the bone. That will change his mind where nothing else was going to change it. And a wise speech is apt. Being apt means having the right word for the right time. A man has joy in an apt answer, and how delightful is a timely word. Just because something is true doesn't mean it's the right time to say it. That's so important. Scripture, especially Proverbs, again, over and over in some verses we haven't looked at yet, we'll see them next week perhaps, talks about how important it is that we have restraint in what we say. We don't say everything that comes into our minds. We say only the things that are appropriate for the occasion. Ephesians, remember, says, let no word proceed from your lips but such as is edifying for the need of the moment. We ask, in this time, in this place, is this the best thing to say? And wise speech is very aware of when to say things and when to just remain quiet. A man has joy not just in a correct answer, but in an apt answer. And how delightful is not just a correct word or a truthful word, but a timely word, one just at the right time. This means not only holding back, but it means being willing to speak when the time is right. He kisses the lips who gives a right answer. It's saying it's like the respect or the affection of kissing the lips to give a good right answer. That means partly correct and it means partly timely. And then this passage is a really, really helpful one for me. Like apples of gold in settings of silver, is a word spoken in right circumstances. Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. So the first picture it's a picture of a piece of jewelry which has an apple of gold set in the setting of silver. And later it talks about an earring of gold, comparing it to the idea that, well, let me say it this way. The apple of gold in the settings of silver is the word spoken in the right circumstances. In other words, the silver setting brings out the beauty and makes the apple of gold. I assume that's just like something in the shape of an apple. I don't know for sure. But the point is, this jewelry is brought out, its beauty is brought out by the setting it's in. And it's saying the words we speak are set by their circumstances. When we say the right word in the right circumstances, it all comes together beautifully. And then it goes on to get more specific. An earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wiser reprover to a listening ear. So it's comparing the gold and the ornament to the reprover and the listening ear to what it's on. It's saying, just as the right circumstances are so important, so is having somebody who's really listening. And so what this is saying is reproof is wonderful, or especially, I'll say at least, especially when it's the right time and people are ready to hear it. So sometimes you'll know what you ought to say, what you want to say, and you'll be correct that it would be true, but you'll know it's not the right time to say it because the person's not listening yet. They're not ready yet. I remember, this is a little different thing, but I remember several years ago, I had this, when I was taught to evangelize, I went through an evangelism program in my youth, and we learned a very long program that we memorized, an hour's worth of stuff, so we could walk through the gospel with somebody. And during that time, they taught us how to, if we got going in a conversation with somebody on the street, we were supposed to make sure and get through the whole gospel. Because if you got through half of it and just showed them that they were sinners and headed for hell and needed forgiveness and then didn't finish it, you left them in a really sort of a bad situation. So you had to get through the whole thing. And then several years later, trying to evangelize with friends, with people that, or acquaintances, with people at school or people that I just knew, I found that I still had this idea in my head that I had to get through the gospel in one sitting with everybody I talked to. And I remember it suddenly struck me one day, if I'm talking to a friend and he's interested, he asks a question, here's what would happen. Somebody would ask a question that would lead to a good discussion of the gospel. And I would get partway in and he would get bored. He would reach the limit where he was no longer interested in listening, and I'd see his eyes glaze over. And I realized one day, when his eyes glaze over, I don't have to keep talking. I can just stop right there, because anything more I say, it's not going to impact him. And it's okay if we didn't get all the way through, because it's in a relationship. That means next week or next month, I could say, remember what we were talking about the other day? I had something more I was thinking about that. What do you think of this? And when he's had some rest and is ready to listen some more, we can do another little piece of it. And I realized it is so much better if I talk to people when they're listening than if I talk over them and to keep talking even when they're not listening. It changed completely the way I thought about evangelism, and it changed the way I thought about teaching, and it changed the way I thought about a lot of things, the way I thought about raising my children. If we notice when people are listening, it will make so many things so much easier. That's part of the wisdom of giving persuasive speech. Here's a couple of interesting passages. I think these are funny, but they're true. Like one who takes off a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar on soda, is he who sings songs to a troubled heart. Now, so what this is saying is it's inappropriate. You don't take a garment off on a cold day, and I don't know the exact chemical reaction that happens when you pour vinegar on soda, but I think it goes, it starts fizzing and sort of erupting a little bit. This says that's what it is to sing songs to a troubled heart. Now, it's important to understand this. It is not wrong to come along to a troubled heart and be comforting or even cheerful. What this is talking about is when you're sort of not noticing or not paying attention to how somebody's feeling, and you're just sort of overriding their sadness with with a kind of a selfish cheerfulness, singing songs to them, sort of expecting them to join in with you and not noticing that they need something very different right now. And here's something else. It says, he who blesses his friend with a loud voice early in the morning, it'll be reckoned a curse to him. Now, I don't know who the him is, whether it's the friend or the person who does the blessing. It works both ways. I think it's the friend. I think it's saying if you bless your friend with a loud voice early in the morning, when he's like, oh, be quiet, I'm not even ready yet, you're actually going to be cursing him more than blessing him. He'll be thinking, wow, this is more like a curse than a blessing. It's sort of like singing songs to a troubled heart. If you're trying to be really boisterous and enthusiastic with somebody who's not ready to hear it, it's not timely. This could also mean that it's reckoned a curse to the person who does it, but I think it means the way I just mentioned it. Okay, two final verses that really don't fit any category at all, and then we'll close for the day. It's going to be a short teaching today. Both of these talk about deep water, and I don't know quite what to think of all of them, but they're interesting. First one says, the words of a man's mouth are deep waters, a bubbling brook, a fountain of wisdom. So this compares our words to water, and it compares it to three different types of water. Deep waters, like a deep pool or a deep lake or something, where there's a lot there, but you don't see it all on the surface. It looks maybe calm and placid on the surface, but there's a lot there. And in the same way, what people say, often underneath, there's a lot more going on. A bubbling brook is the person who's just bubbling over, and a fountain of wisdom can also be what words are, where they're again life-giving and bringing refreshment. Here's another verse. A plan in the heart of a man is like deep water, but a man of understanding draws it out. This isn't talking about the words being deep water, well, a little bit. It's talking about the plans underneath being the deep water. And it's saying when you listen to people, somebody said to me once, everybody has a plan. And if you can listen for the plan and draw out the plan, they'll really connect with you. And you'll really be able to share with them very openly. So I think he's kind of right, that people have a plan, but they keep it hidden. They don't bring it to the surface. They just talk about the surface stuff. But it says a man of understanding draws that out. It draws out what people's desires are, draws out what their goals are, what their fears are, what their aims are in life. Again, this kind of wisdom to be able to draw that out of people is of tremendous value as we're seeking to minister in the gospel and in the truth with people around us. Okay, so I just like all these verses. I think we all have, I have a lot to learn in all these things. I love that Jesus is such a good example of these things. And I love that with all these things, every time you see this list of commands in Proverbs, we shouldn't take it as just something to make us feel guilty. We should take it as kind of promises of what God is doing as he's sanctifying us. God is going to teach us wisdom. He's going to teach us how to speak, how to act in ways that are really as sweet as this. And so I look forward to talking more with you all about some of these other Proverbs about speech next time. And I'll see you then. Thanks.